I realized I wasn't going to be a professional skateboarder. Steve Ruge at Thunder and the guys at Real they started putting me on flow team for a while. I think out of sympathy. Thank you, Shrugi.
That's something.
It was something. It felt great. But he was the one who told me. He's like, listen, you're never going to be one of the big guys. If you want to do something in skateboarding, you ought to think about getting involved in the industry side. And I thought about that for a while. But then I tripped and fell into biology, and kind of the rest is history.
And fell.
I know. It's like, Then I got into academia.
Well, I followed a high school girlfriend down to Santa Barbara, and I wasn't intending to go to UC Santa Barbara. But then I wanted to be with her, and then I thought about joining the fire department, and then I realized getting a degree might be a good thing and some structure. And so,
no interest in it before.
I've always liked biology and animals and understanding
so there was
things.
something.
Oh, I'm like, I devour books. I mean,
and back then you did too.
I did since I was a little kid.
Okay,
but books about everything. Books about weapons. Books about sex. Books about skateboarding. I mean, there weren't books about skateboarding, but you know,
the idea of going there didn't seem. You were like, I'm just going to consume information. Because it's not difficult for you to do so. So you went there and it sounds like it was pretty easy transition, in especially considering you didn't really have an interest in it beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, without going into the whole backstory, I mean, I had a pretty healthy family growing up, and then my parents split up at about 13, right about the time I got into skateboarding and going to Embarcadero and going on little van tours. Not Ford vans, guys. Skateboarders are just relentless. Like if you say
it's so crazy,
it's true though, right?
No, I'm like, why is he protecting himself so much?
Well, I'll tell you why. I'm
like, it's unnecessary. I know, dude.
Because I mean, I think it's because I don't want to give the impression that I was fated to, So yeah, got lucky because our friend Jake Rosenberg went to my high school. He was filming Guy and Gons and Jason and all those guys at his house. So got to hang out with all those guys. But that's different than skateboarding like those guys. I knew that there was a gap there, right? That there was.
It just doesn't count to me. I said to somebody before you came in today that the guys that were skateboarders that knew that they weren't going to be pro were more hardcore than us. Because I knew that there was a payoff. Like I was going to do it regardless, but it also helped to know that somebody was going to give me free gear, give me money. Wherever I went to the ramp, everyone's like, oh, so-and-so's here. Right. That felt good.
When you guys got early fame, I mean, I don't recall until maybe doing some podcasting, walking in a room and people clapping is not something that getting excited to see you is something that you guys experienced young. No, skateboarding in that community, in the punk rock community in the East Bay, was like my non-biological family. Because at that point, my biological family pretty much disintegrated.
Right.
It's, my dad moved away and things were I was really feral. So it was great. I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about.
Sleep on the streets?
I didn't live in Embarcadero. I lived at a guy named Ray Meyer's house. Do you remember Ray Meyer?
Yeah.
He lived with his parents. I spent some time out of school that eventually got me sort of on forced control of the system for a little while, and then got let back into school. Then I got a girlfriend and started getting really into martial arts and really into weightlifting and really into running. And I was still skateboarding a bit, but then I kind of fell out of it.
Was she into martial arts?
No. She was into horseback riding and being a high school girl.
She was into structure.
She was into structure. She was the one that went to college.
You into structure.
Exactly. Okay. And then, so there, I would say from 13 to 19, I was pretty wayward. Barely graduated high school. I showed up to my graduation. I don't know how I graduated, but I graduated. And then I went to community college. I eventually got into UC Santa Barbara, but my first 2 quarters of UC Santa Barbara, I pretty much flunked out. I was getting in fights. I wasn't going to class. I was a complete screw up. But, I was 17 years old and, and there was the environment of, tons of girls and drinking and partying, and I was 17 years old and I was coming to it as a skateboarder. So there were all these kids that had just lived at home and never gotten out of the house. They're like, no way, and going crazy. And for me, it was more like, well, I'd hung out in Embarcadero, gone on some van tours. I didn't really have much parental oversight in the previous 5 or 6 years. And so I really knew how to cash in on the environment. It was like, this is amazing. But school didn't happen. So what happened was I took myself out of Santa Barbara, moved home, started working, going to community college, and got serious. So there was a kind of a moment, a cliff when I was about 19, when I was like, listen, I realized I'm not going to be a skateboarder. I don't have any connections to the industry anymore. I was doing some Thai boxing, but there wasn't really anything to it at that point.
Yeah.
I wasn't good at anything. I'm like getting in fights. I work at a bagel cafe. Like I'm good at making, smearing cream cheese on bagels, which is a job, right? But that's when I realized I'm like, what am I good at? I'm good at learning and reading, and I enjoy it. So this is the moment.
It seemed like
I'm
you
just
had
gonna,
some will, like you just saying that you worked at that store, like that's nothing wrong with that, but that's not for you. You were destined to excel at something.
Well, I've always had I would say, my gears turn fast.
Right.
Like I wake up in the morning, and some days I'm kind of groggy and I'm kind of didn't sleep well or something. But most days, if I sleep well, yeah, I've always had a kind of intensity for anything I do. So when it was skateboarding, it was like skateboarding.
Right.
I was going to see what I could do with it.
There you go.
And I think looking back, I had a ton of fun with it, and the friendships and the fun, and you guys know.
But also the hustle and the drive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it takes to be a skateboarder on any level. You already learned that early on.
Yeah, and falling and you know, there weren't always filmers with us, and if there were, they weren't pointing the camera at me. You know, so I was really driven, and then once I sunk my teeth into Thai boxing, I got really into that. And once I sunk my teeth into school, that was it. I was just like, and you know, it was interesting because I looked at school and I realized you don't actually. It's so trivial and obvious when I look back, but I realized I'm like, you know, unlike skateboarding, I can read until I collapse and I don't get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? I can work like a maniac. I can just study and learn. And so there was a direct relationship between how hard I worked and then my score. So I went from like a C/D student to a straight A student, except there's this one class I got a B+ in that I'm still pissed off about. And it was that way the whole way through. It was just biology, psychology, molecular biology, and I just loved it. I fell in love with it. And the community of science was different, obviously, than skateboarding.
Yeah.
You know, people behaved in different ways, but it was also really welcoming. And I was really blessed. I had 3 advisors: undergraduate advisor, graduate PhD advisor, and my postdoc advisor, all of whom were amazing mentors and really encouraged me. They saw how much, you know, I literally lived in the laboratory as a PhD student. I was like, why pay rent? Just stay here, spend the money going snowboarding. I was close to Tahoe.
But you stayed in the...
I slept in the lab. Yeah, at the time I was single, I'd bring dates to the lab.
Yeah.
Show them some brains, you know?
Yeah. Oh, brains always get some.
So, yeah,
Sorry.